Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Hudda Tonight. This is our second segment tonight for the first part, the first half of our social segment. We're focusing on the Arab League, which was established in 1945. We've been joined by Professor emaad.muhanna. Assalamu alaikum, Doctor. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. Thank you.
So we're talking about the Arab League. This is, we recently saw the anniversary of the formation of the Arab League, yes. So it's very timely.
22nd, yeah.
Okay, the 22nd of March, just
yeah.
a couple days ago. Or was that yesterday? That was
yes,
just yesterday.
Yes, it is. So we just almost right.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So it's a very timely discussion. Can you open up by talking about the formation in 1945? Yeah. Describe for us what was happening globally.
Yeah.
Obviously, this was the end of the Second World War.
That's right.
Okay,
that's right.
And I think the UN was also established.
That's right.
In 45.
The same year.
Can you just talk about that?
Well, it actually goes back to the First World War, 1916, and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire afterwards, 1923. And basically the rise of the colonial powers, England, France, Portugal, Spain. United States was still a little bit behind at that time. And from that time, basically the world started to take a new shift towards a new world order. In 1936, the British Empire basically enforced the protection rule over Egypt and Palestine. And it was called the Transjordan at the time. And then that's 1936, and it's also, despite the protection rule over Egypt, Egypt was declared at that year a free country. So it was just a kind of, we'll help you until you grow up kind of thing. But they remained there until 1952. From 1936, 1940s, we started to notice the Jewish migration into Palestine, buying land, some to also be absolutely honest. They bought certain parts of the land, with money. They started to fight with the local Arabs to gain, control over certain lands, particularly agricultural land. And then we started to see militia fighting, where they have basically certain syndicates, Jewish syndicates, basically forcing people to get out of their land, buy cheap, that kind of thing. And that time it took place about 10, 12 years, from the end of 1930s until 1947. The deal between the Jewish state and the British Empire is to basically slowly allow them to get into Palestine and protect them. And then basically declare the State of Israel, which happened after the Second World War. And that time the Ottoman Empire was already broken from the Second World War. So going back to the 30s and 40s, I think with the New World Order, the rise of Germany as well, the cooperation, particularly economic cooperation, political cooperation between the Ottoman Empire and Germany. And if we just remind the respective viewers, there was a train they wanted to do from Turkey to Germany, and that basically will threaten the colonial control of England and France, on the eastern part of Europe, and basically started to attack the Ottoman Empire. During that time, we've seen Muhammad Ali predecessors in Egypt, and they basically were trying to put more and more control over the Kingdom of Egypt at the time, because Fuad and Farouk are basically his they are grandsons.
Just to clarify the point you just made about Ottoman-German relations, this was to develop a trade, a route.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there was a train line that was basically planned to go from Turkey to Germany across Europe.
This couldn't be tolerated.
Absolutely, because it threatens the colonial control of England and France. And they started basically to fight, here and there, until it really escalated in 1941 and started the World War II. But with the end of the World War II, it became basically, with the millions of people died, it became absolute that the world will take a new shift of power. So we started to see the rise of transnational organizations, the supranational organizations such as United Nations, and basically we started to see basically the idea of the European Union, the Arab Union, and then from there we've seen 10 or 12 organizations were established, one after the other. The first were basically United Nations and the Arab League, and it started with 6 countries only: the Kingdom of Egypt at the time, Kingdom of Iraq, Transjordan, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Yemen. And basically these 6 countries, and Lebanon as well, so these countries started to develop some sort of a vision for the Arabs to be a united nation, because basically they share same language, same culture, same land, border, the same national security concerns. So that was the start of the Arab League.
So the purpose, when these initial 6 Arab countries got together to create the Arab League, it was for the purpose of
economic cooperation and protecting the national security of the Arabs.
So it did have a defense aspect to it.
Definitely. Okay. But it had an involvement of the British Empire. At the time, Eden was involved, before he became the Prime Minister. And also the British intelligence, because very clear that the British had really their fingerprints all over it, because they were worried that it becomes a strong organization and it creates some sort of a confederation, and it backfires on them. So it becomes basically what they were worried about from the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
So it's going to happen now with a legitimate cooperation. So they put their hands on it. So you find that the actual charter has some problems, as we probably discussed it before. It doesn't allow for a joint army. It doesn't allow for a voting system to be mandatory on the rest of the countries, things like that. So we'll talk about some of the aspects of the charter, but and also the name doesn't have a word united in there. It's called the League of the Arab States. So basically the England and France wouldn't let go, because they were worried that it creates basically some sort of a legitimate power in the Middle East, and these people control resources. That time, oil started to show, and so on.
So it's almost not almost, but it's very self-refuting.
Exactly.
They're coming together for defense, political solidarity, but they can't create a military.
Exactly, and this is how when you play on the technical aspects. So, for example, you want to get a weapon to protect yourself. Just to give respected viewers a simple example, you want to get a weapon to protect yourself, but in actual fact, you went and bought a dangerous weapon that you can't really control or know how it works. So you technically misuse it, so it backfires. So this is basically what is happening. The technicality of the establishment of the Arab League wasn't right, and therefore you find, for example, there are now 21 countries after the suspension of Syria. But in total, there are about 22, and if you include South Sudan, you're talking 23. Now, if 20 countries are voting, and 15 vote yes, and 5 vote no on any topic, the decision becomes mandatory for the 15 and not obliging for the 5.
It's not comprehensive.
Exactly.
For the body itself.
Exactly. Which basically means that if you say no on any topic, you're totally out of it. There's no obligation on you to actually control it. But if you find that the majority comprehensive voting system is that if you say yes, you follow if it's a majority, and if you are the minority, you're still going to follow, because the majority have said yes.
Right, just like the 15 members of the UN Security Council.
Exactly.
There's 5 permanent ones and 10 that float in and out on a 2-year basis.
Exactly, 2-year basis.
Whatever the 5 say, they have veto power.
Exactly.
Right? It's a completely different arrangement.
Exactly. Right. So here, majority means nothing.
And by the way, let's not forget the fact that there's no permanent on the UN Security Council, a very powerful body, and in fact, the most powerful in the UN. There's no permanent representation of Arabs.
That's right.
Of Africans or Asians.
There was it was a suggestion, I think it was in 2001, 2002. There was a suggestion of adding 6 countries. There was South Africa and Egypt from Africa. There were Germany, Japan, Brazil, and India. Those countries were proposed, actually 2001, 2002, having a permanent seat in the Security Council, but without veto. So they don't defeat it. So again, one can just, you know, throw the toys out of the cot kind of thing. So the difficulty with the Arab Leagues is that how it was established, yes, it has a good vision and a proper mission to basically protect the national security or the comprehensive national security of the Arabs, but yet technically it wasn't structured the right way, and therefore you find that the Arabs never agree on one topic. Not even one topic. And if you go through the history from 1942, we're probably looking about General Assembly 134 or something. They never agree on one thing because the voting system actually defeats it out.
I see. All right. So would you like to move into the charter itself now?
Yes, the charter is quite short, but it basically you know, kind of emphasizes the fact that the Arab is a united nation based on culture, religion, land proximity. Basically, it's the oldest sons and daughters of one nation, following Islam and Christianity and even Judaism. So the charter is quite simple, and that simplicity doesn't allow the Arab to have a lot more to do with it. So if you look at the reaction of the Arab League when it comes to cases, they always play a passive role. So if you look at the civil war starting in Lebanon and the Lebanon crisis in 1958, very, very minor role. If you look at 1947 and the establishment, and that was 2 years after the establishment of the Arab League, they couldn't do anything with the invasion of Israel. You know, the Jewish militia taken over from the British. They couldn't penalize England for basically withdrawing in 1948 after giving full control to the Jews in 1947. So couldn't do anything with it. When they basically Egypt had the peace treaty, and we could talk about that excuse me, in more depth. In 1978-79, all they've done, they just voted against Egypt and they moved the headquarters to Tunisia, but they couldn't do anything else. So you can't really have, there's no strong rule of action to the Arab League to take action. Even with the Arab Spring, nothing could be done. The attack of NATO on Libya, nothing. The attack of 1990 of 45 countries gathered against Iraq, nothing was done.
So wait, just to understand, one of the tools that the UN uses, for example, the Security Council, they can impose sanctions. We saw this applied to Iran, for example.
That's right.
Very heavy prices Iran had to pay. Are you saying that the Arab League can impose sanctions?
No, it doesn't have that at all. You can't put sanctions economically. You're not allowed to make an army, joint army. You can't even enforce a voting system to get people around you. You can't even, even if you get involved in a war, like in terrorism or the situation in Yemen, with the Houthis, it's actually fought based on the fact that is self-defense, which is a United Nations issue, not the Arab League issue.
So it almost appears, I mean, one would get the impression that it's
absolutely useless.
It's a showpiece.
That's right. And in a previous episode, I always describe it as it was the intelligence of Eden. He pushed for the Arab League, he and his team pushed for the establishment of the Arab League before the Arabs wake up and realize it. So you know, if these kids grow up and get the idea, they're going to do it. So you grow and you quickly go and do it for them, and you do it on your own terms. So this is what basically happened. And if you look at the structure, the voting system, the authorities that really have, within the Arab League, they're not similar in any organization. So it basically makes it obsolete.
Even the African Union.
Yes, the African Union has an army, and they can move an army, and they can impose sanctions.
And by the way, we shouldn't. There are 3 sub-Saharan African countries that are members. That being Somalia,
Djibouti, and Madagascar. And Madagascar or the Comores is also a member.
Okay, all right. And Sudan, so that would be 4. Sudan is also as well.
Yeah.
All right. What about the Secretary General? How is he put in? his position? Is he elected?
Well, no. Well, it's a simple voting system basically when they get the majority on it, and I think except two, one was Saudi and one was Tunisian, the rest are all Egyptians. So it's and I again see, despite the fact I'm Egyptian, but I still don't see a democratic system within choosing that, because it doesn't really reflect any proper criteria in how we choose a security general.
I see. So it's a simple, each member casts one vote.
That's right.
And the majority wins.
That's right. But and I think it goes, from my point of view, it goes just, behind the scenes.
Okay.
The countries talk to each other. He's an Egyptian one. And you could say that Mr. Abu Ghait, who was nominated recently, in 24 hours he was on. After Mr. Al-Arabi. So Mr. Al-Arabi finished his period.
How long is the
2
term?
years.
2 years. Okay.
So he's finished his period. Mr. Abu Ghait, who was the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Egyptian foreign minister, he was basically nominated by Egypt. Certain contacts basically gets you majority. And
is this a full-time position with a salary and all this?
No, absolutely. It is definitely, there's a full contribution from the 22 countries. And there is also, it's a structure very similar to the other organizations. There's a general departments basically for economic cooperation, for education, for,
culture,
fighting terrorism, culture, science. Exactly the same structure. The only difference is the fact that you can't really impose strong decisions on members, and basically in the end, people attend, and for a fact that it's not mandatory to actually abide by
their resolutions.
Exactly.
How would you compare the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council of these 6 Gulf states?
It's a lot stronger, but again, it's very specialized because it's really focused on economic cooperation.
Yeah.
And it's definitely successful, and it's driven by the oil production. So here there is major tied and similar interests. So they very close. They very systematic. The charter is a lot stronger than the Arab League.
I see.
So definitely the GCC, you can even see when certain political destabilization took place in Bahrain or in other parts, you find they move in Manama with the Shia. So again, here you can say that the movement is a lot faster on the GCC than the Arab League.
I remember it was a couple years ago, there was some tensions between Qatar and some of the other members. That got resolved, as far as I understand, pretty quickly.
Exactly, from the GCC. And that was the issue around the Arab Spring. It was the Arab Spring in support of Qatar to certain, groups in the Arab Spring, and basically large part of that tension was in Egypt, particularly, and the GCC
with the Muslim Brotherhood.
That was the Muslim Brotherhood, but the GCC was the only one that could really put it down by backing off Qatar, because it really escalated, became very tense, and the Arab League couldn't resolve it.
I see.
So the GCC basically is a lot stronger in brief than the Arab League.
And the proof is in the resolution to this conflict.
Resolutions, and Qatar has to withdraw. Yeah.
All right. I'd like to go back to Arab League and this historic peace agreement between Egypt and Israel, brokered by the United States, the Camp David Accords. Egypt's membership in the Arab League was suspended.
That's right.
Right? Following this peace treaty. Would you like to say more about this?
Yes. Let's basically, I'd like to go back to 1960s. We probably mentioned it in some episodes. We're talking about the plan of the new Middle East. It goes back to 1940s and 50s. And I think the 1967 war was planned to go into Egypt, kill the Palestinian case completely, and divide the Arabs. And I think from the 1967, until 1973, when the war again erupted to restore or return Sinai, I think during these 6 years a lot of politics took place. And I think President Sadat saw it that it's an opportunity to get Israel to stop their passion for occupying large portion of the Middle East by the peace treaty. So he looked at it differently. Some of the people or the groups that look at it from the Islamic point of view, that you had a treaty with non-Muslims and basically you killed the Palestinian issue. But he looked at it from a different point of view. And if you allow me, it was just in the movie that was made on him. He said that to his barber, he said to him, you've got 6 chairs in your shop. Some people attacked you and they took the 6 chairs. And he said that I could get you 1. Would you take it or would you refuse and say, no, I want the 6, all of them? And he said, the barber said to him, no, I would take 1 because that's the only thing I've got now, and then fight later and get the other 5.
The other 5.
And this is the difference between his view and the Arab view. He said that if with the peace accord, or the Camp David Accord, the Palestinians will be granted all the land back to 1967. They will withdraw, Israel will withdraw. Palestinians said no, we were not going to sign, and we want all of it, and we're going to declare that as a illegal occupation. And this is basically where his example was. Now you could probably hear that Sadat was ahead of the whole world 30 years ago, because you're not going to get all of it. It's a fact. So whether you take 1 or 2 chairs, better than nothing, and then fight for later, you know, fight, build your own nation, and then start fighting again, or say, no, I'm not going to take 1 or 2 chairs, I'm going to fight until I get all of it. So the fact here is how you were reading the politics. And on that particular point, I made a study comparing between the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel and Hudaybiyah treaty between Prophet ﷺ and the non-believers.
Okay.
And there were a lot of similarities in there. If you look at the actual conditions, were totally against the Muslims. You know, you go back, don't go for Hajj this year. If somebody converts to Islam, you send them back. And if somebody converts back to become non-Muslim, we will not send them back. So a lot of things, the conditions were against the Prophet, were against the Muslims. Yet he accepted it.
It was largely against the Prophet, peace be upon him.
That's right.
But he agreed to it.
He agreed to it. And because he knew that somehow it's going to work out for them
in the long run.
In the long run. So he was wise that basically that tension that was put on the Muslims was actually the actual pressure that was put on the non-believers later on to make them break the treaty themselves, because they broke it. The Muslims never broke the treaty.
I see.
And basically there is a lot of similarities. And I'm not saying that the Camp David treaty was good or bad. I'm just saying that politics is about point of view, and how you put your point of view and support it with evidence for the benefit of the nation. You find that a lot of leaders will sign treaties and they can't back it up, and in the end it backfires on the nation. So I think it worked well for the Arab nations if they made use of it, because it put Israel neutral, absolutely neutral, for the past 4 years. Yet what have we done as a nation?
So you think that, did I understand you to say that Israel's ambitions were beyond Palestine?
Exactly.
Even beyond Sinai?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. They want to get into the river, the Nile River, and go northeast to Iraq. And if we look at the plan that is actually announced, it's between the 2 rivers. You know, the Euphrates and Degla and the Nile River. And in their plan, they take the northern western part of Saudi Arabia, the whole Sham, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, go take half Egypt. This is the whole plan. So Sadat in his notes said that he could read that, because Sadat saw the maps of the new Middle East. And I think we mentioned it in one of the episodes. He came back and told King Faisal. King Faisal never saw the maps of the new Middle East, dividing the Middle East into, smaller countries. But Sadat saw these maps and started investigating by intelligence, investigating these maps, and he found that it's actually a whole complete plan put for the Middle East. And he came back and told King Faisal. And from that point, they started to unite between 1967 until the war in 1973, because Sinai was the nail that's going to start the whole thing rolling.
And he was in a very different position from all the other Arab states.
Exactly. He had 229 aircrafts. The stock was almost finished. The stock in Egypt was enough for about 17 days. He was fighting continuously for 11 days. He had no stock whatsoever. And the only person that really supported Egypt very well at the time is King Faisal in Saudi Arabia. And some of the Arab nations, like Kuwait, some from Emirates.
And weren't the Russians also supplying?
No, the Russians came when America started to move. Because if you remember, before the war, the night of the, before the war, he actually instructed the Russian ambassador to take out all the 40,000 Russian experts. Because Russians are very slow when it comes to war. They don't easily get involved. They take their time. And you can see now they left Syria for how many years, and then they decided to go. So that's the style of the Russian. They don't go fast like the Americans. So in the war, they didn't want a war in the Middle East because they don't want a confrontation with the United States. But Sadat never told them. He said, no, I'm not going to fight. That's about it. Done. Take your experts out because we don't need them. When the war started, Russia was worried that the United States will get involved, and then the United States becomes right there in Egypt. So they started to move.
I want to ask you about this watered-down treaty of the Arab League.
Yeah.
If it had more teeth in it, do you think that Sadat, I know this is just speculation.
No, definitely.
Do you think that Sadat's decision to make peace with Israel would have been any different? Because the majority of the Arab League was saying don't do it.
Yeah. I think if they had teeth in there, I think it would give him a confidence not to do it because he knows the Arabs are behind him. Because remember, also, the reason that made Sadat do it because he didn't really have a solid support from the Arab League. They can't do anything.
Yeah, because of the charter itself.
Exactly.
The way it's,
so they can't support him. And you already have, during that time, most of the Arab countries were still, broken, coming out of different colonial setups. So they can't support him.
Right.
So
I'm just really perplexed about the military and the defense aspect of the Arab League. In 1950, 5 years after the creation of the Arab League, this Joint Defense Council of the Arab League was established.
Yeah.
Help me understand the difference between this council, this defense council, and having a standing, dedicated armies like the UN peacekeepers.
It's on a case by case, if you like. Very simple. If there is a threat, we could, do certain, form certain troops and fight it
using our own national forces.
National armies. But you can't have a freestanding army.
I see. Got it.
So it's different, and this is what what we've seen in Libya. What we've seen in Yemen, what we've seen in Iraq in 1990 even. The Arab troops that were sent, they are part of the national armies, not a joint Arab army.
Right, got it.
So you go in as one of the 45 countries. If you remember, the 45 countries, when Egypt went in there, they went as one of the 45. It didn't go in as an Arab country. Because it would have gone based on the Arab League Charter. But the Arab League Charter doesn't allow that. So you would go under United Nations Charter.
I see.
And the Security Council basically instructions to go in. One of the problems, I think, with the you could see clearly the difficulty that the Arab leagues have when it comes to defending the Arab rights is the 242 resolution 338 of the withdrawal of Israel from Palestine back to the lines of 1967 before the war. They couldn't do anything about it.
Okay, so are you saying that this Saudi-led joint Islamic military alliance is the first time that we would see
absolutely
a separate, dedicated military force to defend and protect Arabs and Muslims, because it's not.
And my expectation is not going to go. They won't allow it, and I'm talking about, you know, thinking from the colonial power point of view. I can't allow you to do that. So if you look at it, you know, let's play the devil's advocate. I can't allow you as an American to do that, because what if I want to get into create a war in the Middle East and get oil? So your army will be there. So they won't allow it. And my expectation is just that it's something to calm down the streets, because people are starting, and you can see that in all 22 countries, people are really angry with the Arab League because it's doing absolutely nothing. The Arabs are victimized all over the place. You can see the victimization of the Syrian, basically, in Europe, you know, the refugees, etc. So people really want to have a wake-up to the Arab nations.
So this is a response to a great concern about the failure of many Arab states.
That's right.
Including forces such as Pakistan. I believe Nigeria is also on this. But you're saying in the long run, it's not going to be.
It's not going to be any solid troop on the ground. And what also the involvement of Pakistan, Nigeria, and whatever, it becomes even more dangerous for the Western society. I wish it works, but I'm looking at it from, you know, devil's advocate side.
We hope you're wrong, Professor.
I hope I'm wrong, but it's very important for us to overcome the plans of our enemy is to think the way they think.
Okay, we got about 5 minutes left. We have to rush to the finish line. I do want to bring up a very important, impactful rift, if I can describe it that way, in the Arab League. Following the Operation Desert Storm by the U.S., 300,000 U.S. soldiers in Saudi Arabia in Arab territory.
Yes.
That caused a great division. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Let's go back, and it's, again, a lot of people know that, but some people might think it's, again, the conspiracy theory. But the reports that came out is what the American ambassador in Iraq at the time, I can't remember her name, Taylor something. Anyway, so basically they released some confidential information that Kuwait steals from your oil.
To Iraq, to Saddam.
To Saddam. And basically kind of aggravated him, warmed him up, so he gone in there. That invasion took place during Karim Qasem, the former president of Iraq, but that time was during Gamal Abdel Nasser, the president of Egypt, and he instructed him to get out, and he went out. He went back to Iraq, withdrew his troops. The situation here became very tense because the Gulf state, the GCC, started to object to the invasion of Kuwait. And a lot of Kuwaitis basically fled to other countries in there. The GCC got involved, so Saddam got aggravated even more and started to threaten Saudi Arabia. So from that time, basically Saudi Arabia is fully protected by the United States because of investment, oil, etc. So they started to basically issue a resolution. It's a customized resolution in 1990, and basically went in there and attacked Iraq basically with 45 countries. The Arab League hadn't really, there were certain Arab countries in there. There was Egyptian troops, Saudi, Syrian, some Emirates, but in effect, in the end, it was run by United States, and the plan was to split the troops of Iraq into two halves. Half goes into that went into Kuwait already, and the other half goes back to Iraq, and a lot of killing that took place at the time, and from that it was the sign of damaging Iraq forever, and this is what we see now in the and I think here a split took place, that what you're talking about. Some Arabs were with Saddam, that we shouldn't really get the 45 countries
and Yasser Arafat was with him.
Exactly, but Yasser Arafat, you know, he's dead now. But I think Yasser Arafat had a plan. He and King Hussein of Jordan and Saddam, and he wanted Mubarak. What they wanted, the actual plan that was reported afterwards, Saddam, King Hussein, Yasser Arafat, and Egypt will create a shield. And if that shield is created, it's like a half a circle, the international troops will never be able to get in. because they will surround the international troops and beat them. So Mubarak basically sold them because he realized that it's a loss anyway. King Hussein and Yasser Arafat pulled out. They sold him as well. So he became absolutely naked.
Isolated, yeah.
So he became isolated, and that's where the sanction was imposed in Iraq and was totally damaged. But the damage here is that the split that took place in the Arab League between countries that are pro-Saddam and countries that are against him and against what he's done. But it's still, it heals. In the end, what is the strength of the Arab League? To be basically with a voice that protects the Arab and protects the national security.
It has to be formed, the voting,
reform,
standing military.
It's a complete institutional reform. The organization itself, the charter, how the members of the Security Council is selected, the rules and regulations, how to operate. It's a complete relook at the Arab League.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for taking your time to be with us.
Thank you.
Dear viewer, we've reached the end of the segment 2. We'd like to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our series on Surah Al-Baqarah. Please get your Qur'ans ready, inshallah. We're going to be opening it up and taking lesson from it, inshallah.